Hey guys, and welcome to yet another rock tutorial. Yeah, I know, I wanted to focus a bit less on rocks because I have the feeling that most of the content on my channel is about creating rocks. But this one is a bit different. It started out as an alpha map that I wanted to use in ZBrush, and I liked the results so much that I decided to create a dedicated rock material out of that. And the graph is quite small, so I think this is something for beginners as well. And all of you will be able to take away something out of that and leverage for your own projects. So let's just jump straight into InstaMAT and let's have a look how to build that. In InstaMAT we start clean, so this is my clean graph. And at first we want to have some nice shapes that we can use for our rock patterns. So I start with a shape generator, set it to grayscale and use the box. And from this one box we will generate 3 different shapes and we'll use them in a tile scatter node. So I always like to have at least 3. That assures that you don't have too much visible repetition in your material. But a simple box would be a bit boring, so let's adjust it. And at first I will use a quad transform. And let's set something up. Maybe like this. Let's do it 3 times. And every one of those should be a bit different. Maybe like this. And the last one like this maybe. And let's cut some of the corners. So what I will do now is I will use the transform node. And let's rotate it a bit. And in this case I will subtract it from our initial shape. Now we can see what we are doing and we can adjust this. And yeah, this one corner might be enough already. But we will do that 3 times and we want to have 3 different results. So let's just do that. Let's see what we are doing here. And yeah, maybe let's just make it a bit different. Maybe just a small cut on this edge. And for the last one, let's do something different as well. Maybe try to cut 2 edges from both sides. Like this maybe. And this should be enough. Let's use another transform on this. And let's try to have this shape more in the middle like this. And we can scale it up a bit as well. Same for this one. And same for this one. Let's give them a small bevel. Not too much. Maybe let's add a bit softness. And we can do that on all of those. So we can just copy and paste this node. So all of them are the same. Let's use a gradient linear. We want to have a bit of a slope in this. So with the gradient linear, we blend it in by using a multiply blend. And I want to have a bit more range. So I adjust this like this maybe. And we do the same with the other ones. Just check that the gradient is still good. That should fit. Yeah, looks good. So now let's use our first tile scatter node. Let's go to pattern and set the count to 3. And let's input all of those. Let's go to orientation and reduce the variance. Let's set this to 90. And the scale maybe to 60 by 20, 16 actually. Go to size, or first to color, and let's set the blend mode to maximum. See what we are doing here. This has to be way bigger. Let's set the luminance variance to something like this maybe. Let's try to adjust it a bit by going to position and using the offset variance, or give it offset here a bit, and adjust the disorder variance as well as the size variance, so that's quite important as well. So not everything is the same. Let's use a second tile scatter, so we can just copy and paste this, but let's adjust the count to maybe 9 by 7. So let's make this bigger. Maybe like this. And one more time. Let's set that to 11 by 17. And let's use the orientation of 0. Or actually 180. Let's maybe try to make this bigger. Try to play a bit with the mask. Same here maybe. Maybe not here. Let's set that to 1. And now we're going to blend those two together. Let's input that into our auto levels here to see what we are doing actually. And I'll have to reduce my displacement factor, maybe to 5. And for rocks, I often like to work with the cylinder. Okay, so let's see, let's use default and maybe like 30 opacity. Let's blend those two together. Actually, I want to have another tile scatter. So the idea here is that I have two ones facing from top to bottom and have different sizes. And same here, I want to have two different ones. This one should be bigger and one should be smaller. We can adjust this a bit. Like this maybe. Let's try to use a max blend here. And now to break the regularity on this one, we use a directional warp and a crystals noise 2. Let's set it to, I don't know, maybe 6. Let's set the directional warp node to 1 and the angle to 90. And we just want to have a slight warp, not too much. Let's use an auto levels here. Now we can just copy this directional warp, use our blend here and do the same. Again, just slightly. Like this maybe. Maybe let's use this first. And we can do another one with this one. It's a bit much. Reduce this as well. We do the same thing here, but the angle we should set to 0. Maybe like this. We can then use another directional verb. Actually, this is wrong. We need this one. Now it's too much. This should suffice. Let's use the directional verb here. Use a clouds noise. Set it to something like 8 maybe. Let's use 4 directions and mode set to maximum. Now let's try to blend those together. The main shapes should be those. Let's swap the inputs. Yeah, not bad. And maybe do the same directional verb based on the clouds noise on this input here. And now use that. So this will nicely break up the edges a bit and also give some details onto the flat surfaces here. And for what I want to go for, I have the feeling that the edges here are not sharp enough. So let's go back to our bevel nodes. And instead of adjusting all of them separately, I'm going to create a local variable based on the distance input here. All should be set the same as we copy and pasted them. And in contrast to a parameter or exposed parameter, which is global, the local variable will be only available in this graph here. So when you create a template, for example, you won't see this as a parameter. But you can always... I actually created a parameter, so let's delete that. Let's expose as local variable. And this won't be available when you create a template, for example, but it will always be available in the graph here. So you can now adjust the distance of all of those 3 bevel nodes simultaneously. Maybe we also need to expose the softness. So let's do that. Yeah, so this is way more the look that I wanted to go for. And don't worry about those. We will fix them. So let's see, they are from this blend, I think. Maybe we should use a maximum blend here. Yeah, might look better. I think we can mask that up a bit. So let's use a histogram edit on this directional verb node here. And let's do it so that we mostly have it on the bottom parts here. And just slightly on the top parts. Yeah, looks good. Okay, so first let's adjust this shape a bit. As you can see, it's not as great. So let's go back to our tile scatter nodes. And let's decrease the size here. Not too much. Let's do the same here. Maybe like so. And for this one, I think I want to have the size on Y Add 2 maybe. Do the same here. Yeah, starts to look better. Okay, let's make a bit space. Maybe a bit more. Okay, let's see if we can make a nicer blend here. I don't want to have those vertical ones too much visible. So the main detail should be the bigger ones. Yeah, interesting. So now let's directional warp the whole thing with a clouds noise. We'll use 4 directions. The other way around. Let's set the most to maximum. And let's increase the scale. And decrease the intensity. Shouldn't look too warpy. There's just something I don't like too much about those shapes. Yeah, that's better. Let's try to adjust the size here as well. Maybe in this direction. Same here. Yeah, I think this looks better now. Let's check this blend. Let's see what happens when we use screen. That's quite nice. Yeah, let's go with screen. We have some flat spots. See where those are coming from. Probably from this blend. Nope. This might be as well this. Yep. Yeah, nice. Now we have some horizontal and vertical details, which look quite nice. So let's continue now and add some details. I think first I want to add some cracks, and I do it simple by using the cracks organic node here. Let's invert it. Let's set it up a bit by setting the width to minimum. Maybe the distortion a bit less. Font looks quite good. So we want to include some bigger and some smaller cracks. So at first the bigger ones. And what I like to do when I'm adding details to rocks, I like to directional warp them with my initial shape so that the cracks, for example, are following the pattern. I need this in my input and this in the intensity input. Let's set it to 1. And let's maybe use an angle of 45. So now we can blend that over with a default blend, but just slightly, maybe 5%. think we can add a bit of count. And it still looks quite projected. In this case, I want to have them more on the tops here. So let's use a histogram edit on our height map. And let's only have it mostly on the tops. Use this as our opacity mask. Yeah, nice. Let's create a secondary layer. I want to invert that first. Then use an iterate. Let's ignore the input. Set the blend to maximum and frequency separated. Let's invert that again. Then use a directional warp again. Maybe not that much. Actually, looks okay. And now we do the same here. Let's use a mask as well. Maybe a bit more white spots. Yeah, the warp is too intense. You can also break up the mask a bit by using a cloud heavy noise, for example, and then subtract it from our mask. That way we also gain a bit details. Okay, nice. Let's add some pause maybe. Or at first, let's try something different. Let's use the iterate node on this one. Set that to maximum as well. Ignore the input. And we also don't want to dissolve that. As you can see, it repeats quite a lot. But we will fix that with a mask. Let's blend this on top. And let's also use a mask. But in this case, we're going to invert the mask in the blend node here. Let's adjust that a bit. Let's decrease the opacity. Just want to have a slight detail here. Maybe like this. Could probably directional warp that as well. Okay, let's add some high frequency details to that. Let's use a fractal sum and grain noise maybe. Set that up as well. I'd like to set that to like 3 maybe. Use the interpolate and gamma sliders and custom gain. Let's add the grain on top. And directional warp again. We can use this clouds heavy noise as a mask. Maybe we can subtract that. Not bad. Maybe we can go a bit back and warp the shapes a bit by using a crystal's blue noise and directional warp here. In one direction. Maybe as well 45 degrees. That changes. Yeah, I think this adds quite a lot. Feels way more organic. Maybe we can mask that a bit more as well. So again, histogram edit on our height map. And let's invert that. So we can see where we're gonna apply the details. Again, you can always invert in the blend node as well. Let's add that. I'm using multiply. As you can see, the multiply blend, the intensity or the blend density, opacity, the blend opacity depends on the order here. Okay, now let's add some pores by using the shape scatter node. I'm increasing the scale and let's change that to circle, R shape. It's a bit too dense. Maybe a bit too big also. But anyway, let's use a slope blur on that. And let's reuse the clouds heavy noise. Let's set the slope blur to minimum. And then we can directional warp it. Maybe with the same noise. And in 4 directions. Oh, let's use the fractal sum. This will make it way finer. Check the modes. I think those are too big. And let's reuse one of the iterate nodes. This one. We need the initial input here. And now again, the same thing, using the directional warp based on our height map. And let's blend that in. By using subtract. That might be a bit too much. So let's create a mask. Maybe we can just use the clouds noise. Yeah, I think this looks better. Okay, let's make some final touches to the height map. Let's use a slope blur node and clouds noise. Let's input this and this as our height. Let's set that to minimum. And let's add that in. And in this case, I'm gonna do the same as before. I create a mask out of that. I want to influence just the tops here. And I also want to break it up a bit. Let's not reuse too many noises. So let's create something different. Just use the gamma slider here. And histogram edit. Okay, let's break that up a bit. Our mask, I mean. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so let's apply some color now. And for the color, I like to create a nice, not height map, but a nice grayscale map. Because we're going to use the gradient map dynamic nodes and gradient map. So when I do this on only this, let's see. I'm going to author the colors from real rocks. So as you can see, it's quite warpy and not as nice. So what I like to do, first I want to use the auto levels one, or auto leveled one, the normalized height map. But let's add a few more nodes. Let's take our normal map and create a height to curvature. Not a height to curvature, but normal to curvature. Let's make it quite sharp. Blend this over our height map. So when you now look at the gradient map dynamic and when we input this, you will see the change. So we have way nicer and finer gradients here. I also want to use a height to ambient occlusion and set it up so that it's quite strong. Decrease the bias and increase the height scale as well as the strength. Let's blend that in. Let's take a look here. Yeah, looks nice. Maybe we could make a secondary one with different colors. Maybe not enough variance here. So let's re-author. Yeah, looks good. You can also use a height slope extract. So this will extract the slopes. Let's use another one and let's flip X and Y. Let's blend those together and use a maximum blend. Now let's blend that in. We use default as well. See how that changes our result. I miss a bit of grain here. So let's create a gradient map. Set it to grayscale and let's just use green and red. Delete the middle one. This. Maybe flip that. Now let's use a vector warp. I think I showed that already in a different video. Let's use something grainy, maybe even this one. And this as our input, and this is our vector input. And this will nicely warp the gradient map or the noise based on the red and green hues here. Let's blend that in. Yeah, I think we can work with that. Create another one. That looks nice. Let's blend those together. See how that looks. I think I want to have it a bit darker. So let's just use an HSL node. Maybe let's try to use a different one. A bit too much variance probably. Yeah. Let's do that again. This looks nice. And I want to have one that is quite grainy with much details and one that is not as grainy and has a bit less details. Just blend together. Okay, I want to have a bit more variance, and this is where this one comes into play. Maybe we can do a second one as well. And blend those, because this is a bit, yeah, too oversaturated. Like that. Let's now use a histogram, maybe a select. And let's blend this with this one. Maybe we're gonna end up with a histogram edit again. Yeah. I think we'll invert our height map and use a histogram edit. Similar result. So what we can do, we can also base that on our ambient occlusion. Let's invert that. And probably need a histogram edit again. Yeah, no, that starts to look interesting. Maybe like this. Let's break that up. Try to use a spots 7 noise maybe. Let's multiply that. Actually, let's subtract. I think that's the better idea. Yeah, looks nice. Yeah, tricky. I think we need a multiply. And invert that. Let's see. Maybe default is the way. Make it a bit easier. Let's not invert the mask here. I actually want to see what I'm doing. Let's invert this one. And then use the multiply here. And let's use that. Yeah, that looks quite nice now. This. Okay, now let's add some more details. We can just reuse this one. Use an iterate. And let's set that to maximum. And maybe we can also directional warp it like we did before. Let's use this as our mask, opacity mask. And let's use solid color. We can always define our color in the node directly. But in this case, to better have it visualized, I want to do it here. And we can something more gray, something more grayish, like this. Let's also use this one, the hide slope extract. Use this as our mask. Just make it a bit darker here with the HCL node. Not too much. This always adds nice detail. But it looks a bit too extreme. So let's decrease the opacity. Let's change the HBL. I also want to take this one with the slopes here. Actually, let's create a new one and adjust it a bit. Just want to have those slopes and break that up a little bit. Now we can just reuse something, maybe even this here. That to subtract. Let's use a solid color again. Yeah, just a slight detail. Then let's use another grunge like these smudges here. And this is our mask. Solid color. Full black here. You never take or use full black or full white in PBR. Because in reality nothing is really full black or full white. I think I want to have a different color here. Make one other blend with our curvature. Want to have the concave. And I want to break that up as well. Maybe even with the smudges here directly. And here I just want to have something quite bright. Then let's use the material mask dust. So for this one we need our height map. The AO, I'll just use this one here. And the normal. And this will also add quite a lot of nice details. So let's see. Probably want to have something darker. Yeah, let's maybe go a bit back. I think I don't like this color here. Okay, let's create our roughness map. I just invert this, the height map. As I think in this case it makes sense that the outer or the parts here are shinier than the other ones. But that would be too shiny, so let's decrease that. Maybe like this. Then let's blend in our first thing we used here. This. Let's add that on top. Next thing we added was this one. Can actually make this a bit shiny or shinier. And always try for your roughness map to go for something that's interesting, but also has some variance. Depends on the material also, but yeah, that's what I like to do. I think I won't use this one, but I go directly to the edges here. Add that. Actually, those were the crevices. And I also want to add the pores. We have to add this. Blend it with the clouds noise. Multiply it. We already have those covered actually, so I don't think I need that. I think this was the one of the blends. This one, the AO, so we don't really need that. So let's just blend in our smudges noise or grunge. Use add. And then this one. Add that as well. Yeah, it looks interesting. Let's see how that looks on the material. Okay, I think you got the point. I'm gonna try to improve that a bit and show you the result. Okay, so after going a bit back and forth, this is my end result here. I improved the color a bit and also the shapes. The graph is basically the same, I just played a bit with the nodes, something that you can do as well. I have a bit bigger color setup, but the rest basically stayed the same. So yeah, if you don't like your result, always go in and play a bit with the nodes. You can really improve things a lot. And this is what I like to do. I always try to build something, but then I go back and forth and see what I can improve or add or even take out what I don't like. And yeah, always compare with the stuff that you had before. So yeah, now it's quite awesome. I think I like it very much. And yeah, doing those final touches within the video is quite hard for me, because you don't want to have a video that is too long, but you still want to show nice workflows for you guys. And it's always quite nice to, again, revisit some nodes and adjust things. And this always takes a while and some iterations. So it's always a bit of a thought process and something that, yeah, again, takes a while. And yeah, from a first draft to a polished material, it's always quite a process and takes a while. So again, it's not that easy to make it in a quick video. Also, I had this already pre-built. I tried to make it from scratch for you guys. Because when I did the materials where we just went over the nodes, yeah, some people didn't really like that. And yeah, I mentioned that it's better to just build it from scratch. So this is what I tried to do here. And yeah, again, the node setup is basically the same. I think I didn't add anything. I just polished all of the nodes and shapes. So this is what you can do as well. Again, take this what I did as a first step and just improve on your material until you have something that you really like. So now let's maybe answer a few community questions. So I got quite a lot of new questions since the last video, and I try to answer all of them. So the first one is from Unreal Artist. He says, great tutorial as always. Since you are answering the questions, I have a suggestion. Marmoset offers a bevel shader baking in low poly meshes. Do we have something similar in InstaMAT? If we only use a low poly mesh with sharp edges and make it a bit beveled without using a high poly version, and that detail is present in the normal map, basically similar to what we have in Marmoset Toolbag. And yes, this is completely possible in InstaMAT. We have a bevel baker. I don't really have a nice mesh, but I think it will be visible with this one as well. So let's create a new element graph. As with InstaMAT, you can bake in the element graph as well as in asset texturing. So I show you both. So I have my low poly X here without all the details. And I created a video on how to make that and how to texture it. This is a whole series of 3 videos, so if you guys are interested, just check it out. But anyway, let's use the mesh bake node here. Let's use this as source and target. And let's just look for bevel normals and let's turn that on. And when I now go to preview as material channel and then use that as my tangent space normal map, you can see how it beveled the edges here. And this is also a great way to preview your bakes. You can set all the settings here, like ray lengths and stuff like that. And when you found your settings, you can either export this and import it again for your layering project or just use the same settings. But anyway, as you can see, when I press M and we don't have the normal map applied anymore, we don't have the bevels. I think that's quite visible. And we can also do that in asset texturing. So let's set up a new project and let's use the axe again. Maybe use a different IBL, the studio one. So I just go to my bake settings, and when I just want to bake maps but I don't have a hide poly, I just keep the source mesh empty. Use the GPU. Let's turn everything off and just use the bevel normals. And now we have a few settings here. We have samples, the radius, and some more settings. So let's just bake. All that finished, and let's just apply that to our normal tangent slot here. Something went wrong. But anyway, yeah, you can bake bevels in InstaMAT. Okay, the next one will be a quick one from Mobile Menace. Hey, can you make a small tutorial on how to render in InstaMAT? If possible, also show how we can render the materials already made in Substance Designer and which normal map to use, etc. Yes, I can totally do that. It will be one of the next tutorials probably. Then from Niraj Kumar, please make a video on texturing a shipping container. And yeah, as mentioned, I have mostly rocks on my channel, I think, so that's quite a good idea. And yeah, I will try to do something like that in one of the next videos. Then from XXSWXX, this was a fantastic series. I'm not familiar with InstaMAT and generally new to creating game assets, so this question might sound a bit silly, but how many material slots do your assets now have in Unreal Engine? Do you have one slot for the rocks, one for the top plates, and one for the mortar, or is it all combined in one material slot? So this is a question about the medieval stone wall tutorial, and in this one, I created a modular asset with a column and a wall, and each of those, so the full column and the full wall, have one material slot, so consisting of base color, roughness, metalness, AO, and etc. And yeah, we don't have a single material for the rocks and mortar and the top plates, but this is all in one material, but yeah, two material slots basically for each object. Then the next one from EXR Size. Hey friend, I have been following the wonderful series, very insightful. Little question here, when remeshing, do we have a method to remove inside polygons? I'm using installer as shown here, but just curious if we really need to these internal unseen polygons, thanks. And this is also about these Stonewall series. The quick answer here is yes, we have an occlusion cull operation installed, which will get rid of the polygons that you cannot see. But in this special case, by remeshing the wall, the inside polygons already got deleted and we have only what we can see basically. But yeah, if you just want to remove polygons that you cannot see, just use the occlusion cull operation. And I think that's all for today, so thanks for watching and see you in the next one.